Hi, this is Bruce Buffer, your voice of the Octagon, and you're listening to MMA Mental.
Okay, we're now joined by top UFC and UK middleweight Tom Kong Watson. Thanks for joining us today, Tom.
No problem, anytime.
Right, let's talk about your last fight. Of course, you're about 5 or 6 weeks out of the fight now. You had a fight of the night and a knockout of the night win over Stanislav Nedkov. How did you feel going into the fight?
Well, I feel really good to get the 2 bonuses you mentioned, and just really to put on a good fight for the UFC fans. Obviously a lot of people in England have seen me being exciting fights over the years, and it was good to put on an exciting fight for the US fans as well. So.
Well, I know from being at the event and being at the press conference afterwards, Dana White wasn't overly pleased with the card in general, but I know he was really, really pleased with you and your performance. What was it like to get that kind of positive response from Dana White?
Dana's in charge of the organisation, so it's good for me. But like I say, really, most of it comes down to the fans. If the fans are happy, then the people at the UFC are going to be happy. So on that night, they had a lot of decisions, which is unusual in the UFC. I think that card was the most decisions in UFC history, I think. So it is what it is.
Yeah, you're right. It is unusual, but you never know how a fight's going to go. And obviously, your fight was just back and forth. I mean, he had you in trouble. You obviously reversed him, and of course, then once you started pouring it on, he just couldn't keep up with the tempo that you were setting.
Yeah, and just that's how a lot of my fights are. I mean, even before the UFC, I think most of my BAMMA performances would have been, fight of the night had they did those bonuses at MSC. I had knockout of the year, and before that in Cage Rage, I obviously had a lot of good fights as well. So, I think it's something that I've tried to do throughout my career, and something that I'll continue to do. Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Now, you're currently 1-1 in the UFC, and obviously you made your debut against Brad Tavares. How much pressure was there on you going into that fight? Because obviously you were so well known as being one of the top fighters outside the UFC. Was there any added pressure on you going in for your UFC debut?
No, not really. I mean, with the UFC, everybody talks about you come in, you got all this pressure, but to me it was just another fight, and I still think really that was fight of the night on that card. We had a good fight. I just think that fight, I tried to put on too much of an exciting fight and just come forward and brawl it out, and that cost me the victory. But I'm not. It's not something that I'm disappointed with. You're only as good as your last fight, and then I'll fight again soon, and that'll be the fight that I'll be judged on. So.
Yeah, that's fair comment. Now, we had you on the show quite a while ago, but we talked about it a little bit in Sweden. I spoke to you in the build-up to your Jack Marshman fight, and one of the things that you said to me in that interview, and I'll always remember it, was you said that you won't feel like you're in the UFC properly until you're fighting on the main card. Do you feel after your last performance, which obviously was an excellent performance, that your next fight should be on a UFC main card?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it as well is, I think the UFC is where it's branched out so much. I mean, I still believe that there's a lot of, the US fans didn't see my last fight. It was on Facebook. If you didn't tune into Facebook, you won't have seen it. So, being on the main card for me gives me the chance to let most of the people see it. So, I would like to fight on the main card, and I think really, for me, I'd like to fight in the States or somewhere outside of Europe. But I don't think the UFC is coming back to the UK until October. So, it'd be great if I could, cross all those sort of checkpoints really for me in the next fight.
Well, hopefully that, like you say, you're obviously not going to be waiting until October for your next fight. Do you any ideas of when you'd like to get back into the octagon?
Well, I'm looking at around July, something like that. After the last fight I had, the doctor, raised an issue with my elbow from the fight, so I had to get MRIs and X-rays. So I'm going to go back to the the doctor in the States in May, but they've pretty much said that I'll be cleared by the end of May. So as soon as I get cleared, then the UFC can match me a fight. So right now they haven't been able to do that until I get cleared. So
if you haven't got your eye on a particular card?
No, I mean there's the July card that is a pretty big card in Vegas, but I mean it's already filling up pretty big. Just a few people I know fighting on that. Cub Swanson's going to be fighting Dennis Silva on that. Obviously, at my weight, you've got Anderson Silva, Weidman, and then Munoz and Timbo. So, I think that'd be and then just so that sort of card really is a big card in Vegas. But there's a UFC card every couple of weeks, so I don't really think it makes a difference where. I'd like to fight in the States, and I think there's a card in August even in Boston. So we'll see what the UFC will do.
Cool. And now, obviously, you've been quite vocal as well about some of the people you'd like to face next. So, who have you got your eye on, and who do you think would be a good matchup for you?
Well, I mean, I'd like to fight someone that, it sounds cliche really, because everybody goes on that British fighters want to just stand up and and throw down, but really I always like those fights that are exciting. I'll fight whoever; it doesn't bother me. But I did ask to fight Vanderlei because I think that would be similar to his last fight with Brian Stan, just with a different ending. And I think Vitor would be a good opponent. But realistically speaking, I think it's going to be someone further down the middleweight division. So I think in the next month it'll depend on how a lot of middleweight fights go, and it'll probably be a winner of one of those fights that I'll end up fighting.
Yeah, they normally like to match the winners with the winners, don't they? Which I think that's something you said to me as well in Sweden. It's funny you should mention Vitor Bavl there, because I know you've also been in the past been quite vocal on TRT. So what are your views on the fact that he obviously was using TRT in his fight with Michael Bisping?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I personally think they're just being very clever. They can, the commission allow it if a doctor, grants you a TRT exemption. But listen, I train in the States, and I know the system, how they're working it, and I just don't think it's that hard to do. And I believe in hard work, not excuses. And I think a lot of these guys are just finding an easier way to do what they do. I don't really have any sympathy for Bisping. He's not someone that I'm friends with, but if you look at his losses in the UFC, they're all to guys that are taking testosterone, with the exception of Richard. So it is frustrating from my point of view, and I'm sure from many of the fans.
Yeah, like you say, it's an unfair advantage when there's people like yourself who are putting the work in and not using anything like that. It's an unfair advantage for the people that are using it. Now, I know, like I already said, we talked briefly in Sweden. You were at the Q&A in Sweden as well. What were your views on the card, and what were some of your personal standouts, or who personally stood out to you on the night?
I thought it was a great card. I mean, I think the last UFC I went to watch was the one in Birmingham where Munoz fought Lieben. And I think it was just a good card. They obviously had the problems with Gustafsson wasn't able to go, but the main event, even that shocked me a little bit. I expected Masasi to win inside the distance. So although be it he was dominant, I thought that delivered more to me than I expected, and I was just really really impressed with Brad Pickett. I've watched him a lot over the years, and I just think the level he's at UK. I think he's the best fighter in England by quite a long way, in my opinion. Just how well-rounded he is in his wrestling, in his grappling, his striking, everything. I don't think he gets as much credit. I was pretty impressed with Ross Pearson, also in a different way, in that I thought he looks pretty slow. I was thinking I thought he would beat Couture pretty easily, and then I was watching the fight unfold, and I thought, well, he's not really doing a lot here, but then he showed, what a world class fighter does, and just he saw an opening and just finished it within a matter of seconds. So I was pretty impressed with the way he could change the pace too.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say as well, it's fair to note that obviously Ross Pearson had a pretty nasty injury on the night, didn't he, before he went out, and obviously that probably affected his performance a little bit in the first round.
Yeah, I spoke to him at the airport after the fight when he was flying back to, I think he was going to Sunderland, and I asked him if his foot, affected his movement, because where I was obviously cage side, I thought, he looked a little bit more flat-footed than normal, and he said, it did affect it, but in a way, I think, that helped him, because, like he said, he didn't chase him around, and then when the opening was there, then he steps on it. But I mean, to go in there with that sort of injury, shows the level he's at.
Yeah, I agree. There's another one I want to ask you on as well. Did you get to see Conor McGregor's performance?
Yeah, I saw his fight. Yeah, I was pretty. I hadn't seen any of Conor McGregor's fights, so there's a lot of hype, a lot of people sort of talking about him, but I haven't actually had the chance to see any of his fights. So I was, got to say myself, was pretty impressed with his performance, and I think I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a big fight in his next fight in the UFC. I think it wouldn't surprise me if he goes pretty quickly up that division.
Yeah, they're talking about him being on the card in Boston, which is obviously a card you mentioned as well. But yeah, there was some really great performance. There was some great performance from some of the Swedish fighters as well, obviously in front of their home crowds. I mean, Razor looked very good, and Akira Korosani looked very good as well. It was a really solid card, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think Akira, really wasn't tipped to win that fight either. So I thought he showed a lot of improvement since he's been out in New York. And as you mentioned, I just think in general it was a great card. And that for me, another fight that I've just remembered was the Reza Madadi Michael Johnson fight was an absolute classic as well.
Yeah, I think that for me that was a contender for fight of the night up until the Brad Pickett Mike Easton fight. But it was a brilliant card. It was a great event to be at. The atmosphere was great as well. Now I know you're I believe you're flying back out to the US soon. So what are your plans in the US?
Well, I've just been training out in California. I mean, I trained out there for my last fight. So I went to Sweden from there. So I'll just get back out there and start training and working on all parts of my game until I know my next opponent, and then I can start focusing on them.
Brilliant. Well, I really appreciate your time today. It was a real pleasure getting the opportunity to meet you in person at the weekend, and obviously having you back on the show again today was brilliant as well. So, but before I let you go, Tom, just want to give you a chance to do any shout outs. Want to shout out any friends, family, sponsors, and let people know about Facebook and Twitter as well?
I mean, the easiest way is, I'm on Twitter quite a lot. I usually try and reply to most of the tweets to me. So I'm on there at Tom Con Watson, and just that on my Facebook page, which is exactly the same, Tom Con Watson. So I've got video blogs. One was just released, and they'll be coming out every 2 weeks. So if people want to follow me up to the next fight, they can check them out.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for your time today, Tom, and I'm certainly looking forward to seeing who you face next and seeing you get another victory in the octagon.